So I think when I go live, that it either says Owl Rock Group is live, or Bert Gary is live, or something. I think people get a general notification, but they already been notified by multiple means that we're coming on board at 6:30, and I have 6:30 right now almost. It's 6:29. So we'll start in just a second. And for those who are already here and listening, we are. Let me go to our group page and secure that we are running. Yes, we are up and running, and I need to turn the volume off. And yes, we are up and running. And there's your delay. Okay. So Rolf has already seen us.
Oh, okay.
And I think we'll go ahead and get started and see what happens. We may be slim tonight, everybody. I apologize. Gene is not going to be able to be here. He has another obligation that came up regarding his new church, I believe. And some of our people are out of town, too. But let's go ahead and see what we got. Who we got? We got Kia and Sheila so far? Okay. Keep an eye on letting everybody in as they come on board, all right? And I will keep an eye on Facebook. Can you hear us, Kia? Are you there, Kia?
I think she's muted. You're muted if you're speaking. You want to go back to the first line, or you want to stay here?
Let's go back to the first one. And
I think she's muted.
She must be. All right, Kia, we are getting started. Let me open my water so I won't have to do it later. Water, the thirst quencher.
Yep. I drank everything today but water, and nothing quenched my thirst until I drank water.
So Sheila helped me get my thoughts together. We've been talking for about 10 minutes. And we are looking at, for the second Wednesday night in a row, we are looking at the word Hades. This is a Greek word, and it's one of the 4 words that are translated in some English versions of the Bible as hell. We know what hell is. Let's go to the next one. Why isn't it not slipping apart? It's weird.
Could be the paper.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have here is the same little slide that we've been using all along, just to give you an update. And you can go back and watch any of the videos starting back on March 12. We're doing a series on finding hell in the Bible. And I was just talking with Sheila about the fact that if you're going to find hell in the Bible, and by hell I mean the English definition of the word hell as God's eternal fiery afterlife torture place, then you probably, the first thing that one should do is look at English translations of the Bible. Now I have 22. I could probably find a few more if I looked online, but I thought 22 was enough. And I compare them for every study to see how these words are used. And the words are Gehenna, Hades, sheol, and tartaroo. These are occasionally translated as the English word hell. And we all know what hell means by definition. It means the fiery afterlife torture place. But is that what the writers meant? Is that what Jesus meant? Is that what the psalmist meant? Is that what Peter meant? So we're going to look, that's what we've been doing. And what we determined is that, strangely, these words aren't used very frequently. Gehenna only appears 12 times in the New Testament, and several of them are duplications. So they're really not different sayings. They're just different versions of the same logia or saying. Hades just 10 times. We did 4 of them last week. I'll show you those. Sheol 63 times, and we didn't do all of those, but I have studied all of them one by one, and I gave representative examples. And for Gehenna, my conclusion was, no, you cannot translate that hell. It clearly means something different. You can disagree. That's cool. We Christians can disagree. If you want to see my studies on Gehenna, go back and look at those videos starting back in May 12. Also with Sheol, there's no way that should be translated afterlife torture place. Otherwise, Jacob and Abraham and Sarah and Rachel and Isaac and Rebecca and all of them are burning in sheol right now, in hell. It means the grave. Hades also means the grave. This is the Greek word for the grave, and sheol is the Hebrew word for the grave. All right? We on board?
Yep.
All right. So, looking at this one, I hope you can see it at home. I know I cover up Patricia and me just a little bit by doing this, but otherwise you won't see it. So Hades is only found 10 times in the Bible, and that's twice in Matthew, twice in Luke, twice in Acts, and 4 times in the book of Revelation. And what that means is that Hades is absent from 23 of 27 of the books of the Bible. Notably, it's not in the Gospel of Mark. You won't find Hades in John. You won't find it you want to find it a single time in any of Paul's writings, in any of his letters. You won't find it in any of Peter's letters. You won't find it in Hebrews or James or any other book of the Bible except these 4. Matthew, Luke, Acts, and Revelation. That also means that Hades is found in only 10 of nearly 8,000 New Testament verses. And it's only used in 3 New Testament authors. Remember, Luke wrote Acts. So Luke used it in the book of Acts and in the book of Gospel of Luke. So that's one writer. So it's just 3 New Testament writers, and only used in 3 sayings by Jesus.
Wow. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought, right? Okay, so this is what we did last week. We looked at Hades in 4 different verses. And the first 2 are identical. Matthew and Luke give us this saying by Jesus where he diagnoses Capernaum as not being praised to the highest heavens, but brought down to the lowest possible, gravest conclusion. Because they didn't respond well to, as Jesus had expected. Not afterlife torture, but not praised to the sky, but brought down to the earth, as in brought down to the grave. The psalm quoted by Peter in Acts 2:27 and 2:31 talks about, it quotes the psalm, and that the Messiah will not be abandoned to Hades, which is Peter's Pentecost sermon, and he's trying to communicate simply that the psalmist was prophesying that the Messiah would not be left to rot in the grave, but that Jesus would rise. He's using it as an argument for resurrection. Next one. So tonight, here's our verse for tonight. Take a close look. Those of you on Facebook, I hope it's showing. I know I'm covering Patricia up probably in somewhere, but you can see her on another one. Okay. All right. So this is the verse we're looking at tonight. It's in Matthew 16:18. Jesus is in Caesarea Philippi. He asked the disciples who people were saying that he was, and they made some answers. Jeremiah, Elijah, whatever. And he says, but who do you say that I am? And Peter confesses, you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And Peter then Jesus then blesses Peter, saying, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for heaven and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And then this verse, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Now the question is, by gates of Hades, did Jesus mean the literal gates to God's literal fiery afterlife torture place? Is that what Jesus meant?
Question of the century.
Question of the century. Okay. So let's see if he means anything else in the verse literally. All right. You can see it in red right here. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Well, here's your multiple choice down at the bottom. What did Jesus mean by you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church? Did he literally mean that Peter is made out of rock? If you take it literally, that's what it means. That the Apostle Peter is made out of granite, marble, or some other rock. He's not a rock, right? So we can't take it literally. Or he could be literally saying Jesus will construct a church building on top of Peter, which probably would be really heavy. I would not want a building dropped on me like the Wicked Witch of the East.
That's very sensitive now with that building falling in Miami.
Oh, yeah. No, you don't want a building falling on anybody. So could he figuratively mean, since Peter has confessed that he's the Christ, the Son of God, could it figuratively mean, and this is C, the confession of faith in Jesus as Messiah and Son of God, like Peter's, is the foundation of the church to come? Or could he figuratively mean that Peter is going to lead the church once Jesus is gone? Those are possibilities, right? If he meant it figuratively. But it's hard to say that he meant it literally, because if he meant it literally, Peter is made of rock or there's a building on him.
Yeah, he would be dead.
Doesn't make sense, right?
No.
Are y'all following what I'm saying? Because, you know, you have to... The thing is, it's really difficult to do good biblical exegesis unless in your brain you start seeing the difference between a literal interpretation and a figurative interpretation in a saying. So did Jesus mean that I'm going to build Peter as a rock and I'm going to build a building with him because he's made of rock? Or I'm going to build a building and I'm going to put it on top of Peter because he's a rock? If you take it literally, that's what you'd have to conclude. But I don't think that's what he's saying.
No.
He's figuratively meaning something about Peter's confession being important to the foundation of Christianity. That Peter's leadership is going to be foundational to the church. I think is what he means.
Yeah.
Makes more sense to me anyway. So with that being said, since we're going with figuratively there, let's look at the next one. So this is our question about the gates of Hades. What did Jesus mean by that? The gates of Hades. Is he literally referring to the physical gates of hell, the actual doorway to God's afterlife torture place? Or B, mythologically, as gates owned by the pagan god of the dead named Hades? Remember, the pagan god of the dead is also named Hades.
Yes.
And his world, his underworld, is also named Hades, where all dead people go as what they call shades, which means shadows. It doesn't mean souls. It doesn't mean spirits necessarily. It means shades. You're like a shadow of your former self. Something transparent, something dark and dim and gloomy. All right? So it could be B, mythologically, gates owned by the pagan god of the dead named Hades, or mythologically number C, letter C, as the pagan underworld of the dead called Hades. He could be referring to that. Or if he's doing it figuratively like he did the last verse about Peter, maybe he's just referring to the grave. I will build my church and the grave will not prevail against it. Okay? So you don't have to answer yet. We got some studying to do. All right? So, what did he mean will not prevail against it? Prevail means win in a battle or to defeat someone in boxing. You prevail, right? So, did Jesus mean by will not prevail against it that a literal church building will win in a physical fight against a literal underground gate?
I don't think so.
I don't think gates and buildings fight. I don't even think they're conscious, so that can't be right. Is he saying that living church people will win in a fight against literal dead people? I don't know why they'd be fighting, and dead people can't fight, so I don't know what that's about. Maybe figuratively. C, the grave will have no power over the risen Jesus' church.
Okay.
The gates of Hades will not prevail against the church I will build on this rock. And figuratively, Jesus' resurrection trumps death in the grave. It wins. Death does not win anymore.
That
Right?
makes sense.
Okay. All right. So, let's get the context straight. Get this map straight in your head, if you will. We need to see this border. You need to see that border. This is the Sea of Galilee down here at the bottom. That blue body of water is the Sea of Galilee. The river running north-south is the Jordan River. It runs from Caesarea Philippi and Dan all the way down to the Sea of Galilee, and then it exits the Sea of Galilee, heading all the way to the Dead Sea. Now, over on the left, during the time of Jesus, over there is Galilee. In Galilee is Capernaum, and that's where Jesus is living, and that's his operation center for his ministry. Over in Bethsaida, on the other side of the river, is another country. It's called Batania or Betania. And its capital is Caesarea Philippi, which is the ancient city of Paneus. Now, why is Jesus, who is operating over here, suddenly going over to Batania or Betania and going up to Caesarea Philippi? And by the way, Caesarea Philippi, according to the archaeologists, they didn't find a single mikveh bath. that the Hebrews use for ritual purification, they didn't find a single pig bone. I mean, they found tons of pig bones, and when they have a Jewish neighborhood, they don't find any. But in that entire excavation up there are tons of pig bones. There's probably not any Jews living there, at least not any ones that are practicing Judaism. So Jesus is in a pagan city. So why did he go there? And I'll give you a brief answer to that over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, over here on the right. The disciples had just gotten back from a missionary journey. They're exhausted. Jesus says, let's go and rest for a while. Number 2, they leave Capernaum for grief. At the same time, they had just learned that John the Baptist had been executed by Herod Antipas. So they're grieving the loss of John. And number 3, they are escaping a crowd. Jesus fed the 5,000, and John's gospel says they tried to take him and make him king by force, and he had to escape. And number 4, they also got word that Herod, now that John was dead, Herod was looking for Jesus. So there are lots of reasons to go over the border. Now, once Jesus crosses over from this border, crosses the river, the Jordan River, and he's going from Galilee to Bethania, different country, and it's ruled by Herod Antipas's brother, Herod Philip. So Philip's not looking for him, but he knows Antipas is. So essentially what he's done is, you know, it'd be like in the old Western when you're in trouble in Arizona and you're trying to get away from the sheriff and he's chasing you. Well, you cross the border into Mexico to get away from his jurisdiction. So Jesus just crossed the border into Mexico, so to speak, except this is the border from Galilee to Bethania. Does everyone understand? Jesus is going from Galilee to Bethania to Caesarea Philippi, and things are really, really tight at the moment. I want you also to notice that Mount Hermon is up here. It's actually pronounced Mount Hermon. And Caesarea Philippi is pronounced Caesarea Philippi, but I'll keep saying the old pronunciation because you won't know what I'm talking about. Capernaum is Capernaum. Bethsaida is Beit Saida. Beit Saida. So, that's the context. Next slide, please. Now, that's Mount Hermon, and it really looks more like a range, doesn't it? It's a very long, long mountain, sort of a range. It's not just an individual peak, it's several peaks. And over to the far right, on the other side, is Damascus, Syria, and over on the far left is the ruins of Caesarea Philippi. This mountain is 9,232 feet. Wow. Next. So Jesus has gone far north. This may be the farthest he's ever gone. Caesarea Philippi is the capital of Bethania. It's ruled by Herod Philip. And the town Caesarea Philippi is named after Rome's emperor and Herod Philip himself. And he was the tetrarch there from 4 BC to 34 AD. He had a nice long rule. So far as we know, Jesus never met him. Caesarea Philippi, it had an original name called Paneas. It's the city of Pan, the god Pan. It's named after the god Pan, which I'll show you in just a minute. And Pan is the son of Hermes. And by the way, Hermes is named after, Mount Hermon is named after the god Hermes. And the city, Paneas, is named after his son, the god Pan. So you can see this is coming together. There's a lot of mythological connections to this location, geologically. All right, so here's Pan on the left. Paneas, Caesarea Philippi, that city is named for Pan originally. He's the son of Hermes. He's a pagan god of Greek mythology who appears half man and half goat. And the word panic comes from Pan, and indeed he was known for panicking people. He was the mischievous god of flocks, shepherds, pastures, mountain wilds, and caves. And if you've ever been to Caesarea Philippi, ancient Banias, in Arabic it's Banias. Everybody over there calls it that. There's no P in Arabic, so they changed the P to a B. And it's not Paneas anymore, it's Banias. It says it on all the signs as well. But you talk about mountain wilds. It's like being in a rainforest. Wow. And these cold, clear streams running through it, and springs, and huge trees, and beautifully green, and huge waterfall, and it's a really cool place. So whenever you have a place of natural beauty like that, Pan is invoked, the god of mountain wilds and nature and caves, and you get the drift. Over to the right is his father, and that's Hermes. Mount Hermon is named after him, and he's Mercury in Greek mythology. Hermes and Mercury, same thing. Hermes was the messenger god. His ability to convey news between the heavens and the earth was accomplished by use of wings on his sandals and his helmet. He also guided the shades of the dead to the river Styx, where Charon, the boatman, would ferry them to Hades, the underworld. See if you can remember some of that, because it may play important in just a sec. Next slide. Okay, here's an archaeologist's recreation of the ancient city of Caesarea Philippi at the time of Jesus. And the most important thing to notice here is right in the middle, is that black spot right there below the arrow is the cave of Pan. It is said to be the gate of Hades. And what does Hermes do when people die? He guides them to the entrance to Hades to get them to go to the underworld. And who is Mount Hermon named after? Hermes. So you've got Hermes guiding people to Hades, and you've got the cave of Pan right there, and he likes caves because he jumps out and spooks people. Okay? It's a natural representation of the mythology that they believed. So the context is Jesus and the disciples have retreated to this pagan city where no one knows them. Caesarea Philippi, ancient Paneas, the capital of Bathania, where Herod Philip rules. And it says in Matthew 16:13 over here on the right, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked the disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Next, please. These are really stuck together. Sorry. Now here is Hades. There's his name in Greek. Hades, also known as Pluto in Greek. By the way, that's the planet Pluto and Pluto's moon, Charon. That's not planet. It's now a dwarf planet. Sorry, it got demoted. Yeah, so Pluto or Hades is the god of the underworld, the dead, and mineral riches. The word Hades in Greek came to mean the grave, but its root meaning is the unseen. Because of his name and location underground, Hades is among the great gods the least painted and sculpted in antiquity. People would turn their face away from his statue. People would not say his name. They were afraid that they would invoke the dead. Okay? In ancient art and sculptures, often he is posing with Cerberus, which is mispronounced Cerberus, the multi-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades and doesn't let anybody leave. So we've got these three gods, all right? That's what we're trying to put together. These three gods to see if it will help us understand Jesus' meaning of his words. So now you can see an aerial view of the grotto or cave of Pan, right? This is ancient Banias or Paneas or Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, that means son of John or Jonah. For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And Matthew continues, and I tell you, Jesus said, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Is Peter the apostle's real name? It's his nickname given to him by Jesus. You know what Jesus called him in Aramaic? Kephas. We mispronounce it Cephas. It's Kephas. And Kephas in Greek is the Aramaic word for rock. He called him Rock, or Rocky, or whatever you want to, however you want to pronounce it. And then it goes into the Greek language, Petros, and then eventually into English as Peter. But his real name was Simon. In Hebrew and Aramaic, Shimon. So he was Shimon and Kephas. Right? Those were the names that people called him before we changed it and messed it up to Simon Peter.
So Peter was his nickname?
Peter was a nickname given to him by Jesus. He called him the Rock, or Rock,
Rocky.
or Rocky.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So again, you see the cave. This is important because that's the gate to Hades. All right. That's what they believed back then. That this was the gate of Hades. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, notice he said plural. There's only one gate here, but he used it plural. The gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Uranos is the word for heaven. That's also a Greek god. It means Father Sky. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed on heaven. The context of Jesus saying, I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it, is in front of a cave of Pan, believed to be an entrance to Hades, the mythological underworld of pagan Greek religion. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
You think Jesus believes in Greek mythology and believes in the god Pan and the god Hades and the god Hermes? You think he believes in all these gods and all these mythological places and myths? No.
No,
So here's an artist's recreation of the temples and precincts, that what they might have looked like in Jesus' day. Notice there's this temple to Pan right here. They used to call it an Augustinium, a temple to Augustus, Caesar, but they've since determined that it probably was not, because it doesn't have a back wall. The back wall, it opens right onto the cave, and in the cave there was a statue of Pan. So when you walk through the doors of this temple, you don't see a back wall. You see an opening, and there before you is the statue of Pan in the cave, on a pedestal in the cave. And the headwaters of the Jordan River came out of that cave and poured around the temple. Today, because the cave is caved in over the years, the water now comes out under a rock down here. But it used to come out of the cave. And Josephus wrote about it. He said they tried to figure out how deep it was, and they couldn't find a rope long enough to lower it to its depths. So it's a very deep, cold spring, and it's snow melt from Mount Hermon. Next. So you've got your cave entrance. That's the cave over there. And that's not the temple of Augustus. They don't think that anymore. They think it's a temple to Pan. Then down here you've got the court of Pan. You've got the temple to Zeus. You've got another temple up here and a lower temple down here. This is probably associated with the tombs nearby, which means this is a necropolis. This place is associated with gods and the dead. Necropolis means city of the dead. So in summary, remember we have Mount Hermon. It's named after Hermes, the messenger god. Then we have the city of Paneas, which is named after Pan. And it was renamed Caesarea Philippi after Philip, Herod Philip. And then we have underground Hades. The god Hades, the realm that he ruled, is also called Hades. And the word originally meant unseen and came to mean the grave in Greek. When you see the word Hades in your Bible, you have a choice to make. Either it's going to be an afterlife torture place we call hell in English. It's going to be the god Hades from Greek pagan mythology. It's going to be the underground abode of the dead in pagan Greek mythology, or it's going to mean the grave. Those are your four choices. You got four. All right, next. So why would Jesus have said gates of Hades if there's only one there? Because they're commonplace, and he knew that. You'll find them around the Roman world and the Greco-Roman world, and here are a couple of gates of Hades. They're called Plutonians because Pluto is an alternate name for Hades, the god Hades. And it's a sanctuary, usually some sort of temple or sanctuary, dedicated to the ancient Greek god Pluto / Hades. And it always involves a cave. So on the top here you have the cave in Pluto's temple near Eleusis, near Athens, Greece. Here's another example at the bottom here. That's from Pluto's gate in Hierapolis in eastern Turkey. I've been there. I haven't been to the one in near Greece. I've been to the one at the bottom. There are also other caves of Pan. This one on the top here is from Thassos Cave of Pan, and it's situated near, where's that? That's Turkey, right? Thassos, close to Limnos. It actually is a small cave, and it has a depiction in it of Pan in bas-relief playing a piccolo and resting lazily. He can be seen inside this cave on the drawing, and the engraving is thought to go back to 4 BC. Then you've got the Acropolis in Athens. I've seen this one. If you've been to Athens, Greece, you've seen the Acropolis. The Parthenon is on the top, you know. Mm-hmm. And the cave over there on the left is the cave dedicated to Pan. The other two are dedicated to Zeus and Apollo, respectively. Mm. It's not unusual to have a cave as a special place for the dwelling of a god or the entrance to the underworld. It's typical. There are many gates of Hades and and caves of Pan. So let's look at it. So why did Jesus use the plural? Let's just look at it in a Bible program here. So it reads Pulai Hadu, Pulai Hadu. That's what it reads in the ancient. This is one of the oldest copies of the Bible that we have that's complete, and it says gates plural of Hades, and the gate and Hades gates plural will not prevail against it. I think he did it plural not because there was more than one there at Caesarea Philippi, but gates of Hades are common, and he would have known that. I can't think of any other reason. So the word is pule. It means gate or entranceway or porch. And Hades or Hades means three things: either the Greek god of the dead, the mythological abode of the dead, or literally the grave. So when Jesus said Pulai Hadu, he employed a play on words. Number one, Hades gates, caves identified by pagans as passageways to their mythological underworld of the dead. And two, grave openings, tomb entrances, burial pits. Sheol is in Hebrew, in the Old Testament, the equivalent word for the grave too. Hades and Sheol, same thing, grave. Is it outrageous to think that Jesus, because they were looking at one of the gates of Hades, to have used that as a metaphor for the power of the resurrection over the grave, and that the church is not under the power of death and burial anymore?
Good question.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't know if you do or not. But here we are with the I think this is the last slide. Last slide?
Yes.
So here's the cave over here at Caesarea Philippi, the one that Jesus stood in front of when he said this. The actual cave of Pan, a gateway to Hades. It's in the side of a mountain called Mount Hermon, named after Hermes, the messenger god, who guides people to the gateway to Hades when they die. And Pan there to scare them about going in. He's mischievous that way. That's just the way Pan is. He's a mischievous guy. And he's a little bit randy too. And he's amorous. I'm trying to say it nicely so the kiddies are watching. So this so-called gate of Hades right here that we've been talking about at Caesarea Philippi, Jesus is saying it's just a cave. Okay? Hades, Hermes, and Pan aren't real gods. This is a passageway to nothing. False pagan mythology cannot stop the coming of the kingdom of God because it is real and it has real power. But he may also be saying, and perhaps more importantly, that this grave, this is a first century tomb with a rolling stone, the kind that Jesus would have been buried in. So this grave or tomb in Israel is just a cave too, you see. It has no power. Jesus Christ's resurrection will prevail over the grave, and the grave will have no power over his church. Okay, so now that you've got all that, here's the question that's been overarching all of these things in our study, all of these studies, these words that we've been looking at. And we're looking at the 5th instance tonight of the word Hades here in Matthew. The gates of Hades. Is there any justification for translating this word as hell, an afterlife torture place? Or is it more likely what is suggested here, that it, would you go to the last slide, please? Mm-hmm. That it is Jesus' metaphorical or figurative reference to the gates of Hades because they're standing in front of one of them. But he knows that Hades also doubly means the grave. He means it both ways because he's looking at one. He's being playful, creative, poetic. And he also means literally that the grave or a tomb in Israel is just a cave too, even his. And death will not hold him down. And because he rose, we rise. So the church, through Jesus and his resurrection, will be raised too. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the grave has no power. The gates of the grave, the opening of the grave, the mouth of the grave, the jaws of death, if you will, have no power because of the resurrection, which defeats death and the grave. Follow? That's the question. I don't see any reason, I don't see any reasonable, rational reason to translate this as hell. I think what it means is the grave, and perhaps also metaphorically, Jesus' play on words because of the cave, because of where they were. You know, Jesus was pretty good about that. Wherever he was, he would use the things around him as examples. Like when he was going to an agricultural village, you know, he talked about farming and sowing seeds. Mm-hmm. And when he would be at a fishing village, he would talk about fish and boats and water. And when he was in Jerusalem, he talked about moving a mountain. And Herod had literally moved one mountain and put it on top of another one to build one of his palace fortresses. And I like to think that he was looking at that mountain, that moved, literally Herod moved, when he was using it as a metaphor for if you have faith as a tiny mustard seed and you say to that mountain, move, it will move.
Yeah.
So you can take things literally and miss the power and the meaning.
Yeah, which I think happened a lot here in this verse particularly.
What do you think?
I mean, you know, I was going back to that the verse where you were talking about it literally and methodologically.
Yes.
So if it doesn't mean the gates of hell or the force of power, as I was led to believe, then if it's mythology, I think it makes sense. I mean, when I look at it that way, or figuratively, meaning the grave, and not literally as the gates of hell, which we interpret as a force of evil. When we talk about the church itself, the literal building, or the church of God, the body of believers, nothing is going to come up against that. So upon this rock, I build this church, and no devil in hell, or no evil,
no powers of evil
will come against the church. It's going to stand regardless of who comes up against it.
Well, see, it's not that that's not true, that Jesus does defeat the works of Satan. Jesus does stand and defeat evil, and the forces of evil do not win in the end. But that's parallel to what may be meant here, which is that death is powerless too in the face of Jesus' resurrection. Death and the grave have no power over, will not prevail against his church.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I missed earlier when you were talking to Sheila. I had stepped away to get some water, and I don't know, Sheila, do you want to say again what your question was, or what you were thinking about with hell? You're muted, Sheila. You're muted.
Hey, Sheila, can't hear you. And while you're unmuting, I want to say hey to Sandra, Jim, John, Joe, Marlene, and Rolf, who are with us over on Facebook right now.
Hey, everybody. And Lynn joined us as well. Go ahead, Sheila.
Okay, growing up, hell was hell. If you did wrong, you're going to go to hell. And I always as a child, figured a great big hole in the ground. Nothing but flames coming up, and I was going to be thrown in it if I didn't do what I was supposed to do. As time went on, and all the Bible studies that I have gone to, they've had different definitions of Hades and hell. Now, this is the best that I've been through, because you're really starting to define hell. There's all kinds of meanings of hell. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you how I feel right now, reading and listening. Hell is just an underground to me right now. That's all hell, or Hades is an underground.
Hades.
Okay?
Yeah. Can you are we making a distinction here between hell as an afterlife torture place and Hades as a metaphor for the grave or the abode of the dead?
Okay, right. When I was young, my grandmother always said, you're going to go to Hades. Okay, that was hell to me.
Yes. Oh, I see what you're saying. Hades meant hell to you and nothing else.
Right.
Right. It was just another name for the same place of afterlife punishment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So is making this distinction helpful for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So when I said hell is hell, I see now that it's not.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, this really opened my eyes on a lot of things that I was taught when I was younger.
Well, one of the things that, I'm sorry Gene's not here tonight, and he could probably jump on this, but one of the things that came up with...
He's smarter than me.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. But he was talking about... Oh, I lost my train of thought now. What were we talking about?
Hell, he said, talked about Gene. He might have been...
Before Gene. I'll think of it again. I'll think of it. You want to...
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sheila, you and I alike, I think all of us grew up hearing about hell as an afterlife, place of torture, that you're going to go if you didn't live right. If you didn't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, that was the alternative. Either you accept Christ and go to heaven and live forever, or you go to hell and be in torture forever and burn. And so I think all of us grew up believing that, and I mean, so I was stunned like you, realizing how little time, little amount of times that it was mentioned in the Bible and the gospel, as Bert talked about on the other slide. I mean, because it was like the theme of our lives. It's everything you did to avoid going to this place of torture. And it became its huge thing. I mean, I preached about hell all the time. Because it's like, yeah, that's what you're living for, to avoid this place. That's what life was all about, living to avoid this place.
I want to underline that, because you just said it. The theology that you learned begins with the only reason for living is figuring out how not to get to God torturing you in hell.
That's right.
Right.
So everything was centered around that. Anything you tell a little lie, you go into hell. I mean, even sometimes... as little kids in elementary school, you do something or you hit someone the wrong way. Why did you hit me? You're going to hell, Or you don't give me a piece of your sandwich. You're going to hell. God said love everybody. So if you don't give me a piece of your sandwich, you're going to hell. Everything was related to that and associated with that.
Yeah, which
I remember how
remember.
many times I was told that I was going to go to Hades.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Hey, was Hades a nicer way of saying hell?
I think so.
But it means the same thing. It meant the same thing when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
now that I know.
Gene, the question that Gene propose that's so central to what we're doing here and to what you're saying, Sheila, is well, if these words, Gehenna and Hades and sheol and tartaroo, don't end up meaning an afterlife torture place and meaning something else, then why were you told that? Why have we thought this all of our lives? Where does that definition come from? And I just want to remind you that in previous studies, I showed you both the 4th Esdras, which was written later than the Gospels, and the New Testament documents. It's a later church document. And then I think the other one was the Apocalypse of Peter, which gives a graphic description of how, you know, blasphemers will be hung by their tongues over flame in hell. And those documents were popular among Christian people in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century, before the church had time to really pull the canon of the New Testament together. And those things, they were excluded as wrong by the early church, and they were not included in the Bible, and they're not there now. And one of the reasons is because of this addition of a afterlife torture place for Gehenna or Hades, whichever word you want to use, and that echoes of those books remained in the church, and you can still read them today. And that's one of the reasons that echoes still remain in the church. Those documents turned a valley in Jerusalem into an afterlife torture place, turned the boring Greek gray Hades into an afterlife torture place, when neither one of them were.
So why do you think then it's stuck throughout Christendom and everywhere else? If only, I'm looking at this slide here, it's only mentioned in Matthew twice, in Luke twice, Acts twice, Revelation 4 times. I mean, only 10 times out of 8,000. Why do you think hell has top priority? Why is it on top of the podium?
Okay, so this is a really quick, fast, oversimplified answer. Because threatening people and frightening them makes them come and give money.
Yes.
That's my easiest answer. It's worked for almost 2,000 years. When they figured out that fear of being tortured by God forever worked, by accident, probably because of these extra canonical books that I was mentioning, they didn't want to give it up. That's my best guess.
Do you think that years ago they believed all this because they really didn't have, how do I want to put this? We have a lot of Bible studies going on. We have better things to find answers to. We got the internet, all of that.
Sure.
We got books now. And do you think that they just really didn't understand all of that, and Hades or hell to them was hell?
Well, first of all, I want to say that not everybody bought that. You know, there have been people over the 2,000 years who have not, who have seen through this manipulation of the facts in order to manipulate people into loyalty with their attendance and their giving, tithing, whatever. There have been people, and there still are today. The problem is that those who peddle and talk about hell the most tend to be the ones who are really dominating television and radio and books and literature. And so the errors of the past continue to be recycled. And because they're effective in maintaining church growth, church number momentum, they're afraid of going there. Also, I think that people, here's some backup to that. There's legalism. People who are legalistic about you got to be good to get to heaven, well, they think of God like Santa Claus, and if you're bad, you get a lump of coal, and if you're good, you get all kinds of goodies. So let's forget about all of this grace through Jesus Christ to the world, the Lamb of God who took away the sins. Forget about all that. Forget about grace scattered like seed in every direction on everyone. You know, forget all that, and let's just get back to, if you're good enough, you go to heaven when you die, where people get, you know, a harp, and I don't want a harp, but anyway, if they could give me a guitar or a piano, I would prefer that, but I don't want a harp. And
harp or the crown? I don't want a crown. I don't want a halo.
I just want a cowboy hat. I want a cowboy hat and a piano. That's all I want. And I don't want to wear a robe. I don't like robes. I like blue jeans. I want blue jeans.
You can't wear blue jeans in heaven. You can't wear it to church.
Well, I'm not going then. Okay, so...
You can't wear blue jeans. So, hold on 1 second, Bert. You can't wear blue jeans to church because that's not dressed enough. If you're coming before the Lord, your master, your maker, you have to put on a three-piece suit, you know, and a tie and shiny shoes. You can't wear blue jeans.
I know.
Else you're going to hell.
I know. It's all about hell. So there's the legalism thing, and there's no room in legalism for grace. Okay,
yeah.
There's no room. You have to start with punishment.
Yeah.
And then you use punishment as a deterrent for people not to sin.
Well,
and then your mentality is if I sin during the week, well, I've got to go to confession, or I've got to go to church and pray and sing, because if I don't, then something might go wrong and I might die this week. And then if I died after doing that without repenting and going to church and doing something to make up for it, so you're keeping score, and you're running on the hamster wheel of works righteousness. So this legalism drives a punishment mentality, reward and punishment mentality, and therefore it supports the idea of there being an afterlife torture place, because that's the consequences of not being well behaved in terms of obeying the Mosaic law. But Jesus said that, I mean, Paul said that Jesus is the end of the law. The grace is the end of the law. The gospel is the end of the law. The law is our curse, because it destined us to failure.
You know,
and wait, I'm not done. I got one more thing.
Okay.
And along with the grace and the legalism thing there, I think that it really boils down to we're too lazy to think. Because grace is not easy to describe, and it is often offensive to people who like keeping score. So, you know, we're going to look at the parable of the sheep and the goats probably next week, and you know, and we were talking about how wrath and judgment worked. Well, the idea is that the thing that makes you a goat, the thing that makes you a judge, is wrathfulness. When you judge someone else as separated from or cursed by God, you're doing the very thing that makes you judged. That it works like a boomerang, and no one wants to hear that, because people like looking at other people and say, well, I'm living better than them, or I'm more blessed than them, and so we're like kindergarten kids. We're like those ducks at the pond fighting over one piece of bread, and you're not going to get my piece of bread. I'm prettier than you. I'm smarter than you. I'm more holy than you. I'm living cleaner than you. You know, I don't have the problems you have. And when you're at that, that's how judgment works, and that's when you do it to yourself, and you don't get away with that. You know, even if there is no torture place somewhere, there is that. There is evil, and there is judgment, and the judgment is, by your judgment you shall be judged. The way you judged others, you will feel. And I think that's part of our education and purification and completion and perfection in Christ Jesus, is that we got to deal with that in that corner of our heart that doesn't want to forgive.
Yeah.
And that doesn't want to see grace. So I had a three-part answer. One was those documents that were flying around in the early church that turned Gehenna and Hades into torture places when they weren't originally. And then you have the judging other people as a mindset, and legalism as legalism and fear as manipulation to get people to come and to give. I think all of that working together has dominated certain corners of Christendom, and unfortunately most of those people are on TV and radio. That's my best answer to your question for right now.
Yeah, I hear you. No room for grace. I mean, that's huge. That's powerful. Anyone else had any questions or comments? Lynn, Kia, Sheila, anything else?
I don't know. I can't. I'm still trying to get all of this tonight.
Yeah. You know what I think was most...
I mean, it's a lot. A lot of information. It's just now.
And Sheila,
to put it all in perspective.
But see, that's my question. Why is this unfamiliar? You would think, since these people talk about hell all the time, and since the reason for being a Christian is to avoid hell, you would think that they would know what those 4 words were and what they meant. I have to start from scratch. You have to start from scratch because they're not doing it. We're not going to get it on the TV. We're not going to get it on the radio. We're probably not going to get it in most places on the internet unless you happen to stumble across someone like Gene or me, you know, and of course, I haven't been written off that I know of by anyone in writing or calling yet that's saying like this is heretical, but I've been very careful to show that it's every bit biblical. And we've done a deep word study on these words, and we're going to keep doing it because I think it's important that if hell is the most important thing, if it's the thing we're going to begin with in our theology, if afterlife torture is number 1 in God's playbook, and God first and foremost is a torturer, which is what they believe, then that should be in Scripture. Now, where are we going to find that? Well, what words are translated as hell? Let's just look them up. And here they are. And there aren't many. There are 4. And they're not in the Bible much.
That was the most shocking thing for me
tonight. Peter, the Apostle Paul, the greatest evangelist who ever lived, never used the word.
Yeah.
He never used the word Hades, never used the word Gehenna. Not once.
It's not in Peter.
It's not in Peter.
It's not in John. It's not in any of Paul's letters.
One of them's in tartaroo's in 2 Peter.
Okay. But
the question is tartaroo, does that mean literally afterlife torture hell place? So we'll have to look at that one soon, I hope.
But it's not in Hades, it's not there. Peter.
And Gehenna and Hades are not there. That's right. That's right. So something's wrong. There's something really wrong. When a word that's used so infrequently and that's used in ways that clearly don't mean afterlife torture place, that somehow hell is number 1 in the theological playbook of evangelical Christians.
Takes priority over everything else.
Takes the priority over everything else. And how they get away with this, I don't know. But they say that it's the gospel. Well, what is the gospel? Gospel's good news. Well, what's the good news according to them? God's a torturer, and he's planning to torture you unless you can do something about it, and it ain't certain. Now, in what sense is that good news?
Yeah.
It's not. It's not biblical either.
Lynn said that she is using a different computer, so she has no microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Lynn.
Yeah.
Okay. It says this must be an office computer or something?
Gender studies.
Oh, the gender studies. Okay. Yeah, Lynn's in a master's program? Master's program in sociology?
Women's gender studies.
It's normally in sociology departments. So I don't know if it is down there. Yeah.
She's doing it in the West Indies.
So we're running out of time. Somebody type something or somebody say something. Any comments? Thoughts? Questions?
I'm ready for next week.
I hear you, Sheila. Yeah, I know. I was waiting for this week because that verse was really one of my favorite verses, and I just knew it was misunderstood. You know, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I build my church. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So I was very curious about that. So thank you.
I had a thing in my book, in my Bible here, about Peter being the rock. And when you were all talking about it and everything, I found it, And I've got written, Peter is solid in faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I had written. So I don't know if that was right or wrong, but I mean.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and that does not preclude his struggling and failing. But his strength came. His strength was built on grace for himself when he denied him, grace for himself when he misunderstood, or when he just put his foot in his mouth, which he did from time to time. Seemed to do from time to time. From time to time.
I would say often, but I hate him.
But
I do most of the time.
Well, you could say he's strong in faith. You could say like a rock, he's a bit hard-headed, a little dense sometimes. But then all the disciples appear a little dense from time to time. But one thing that he was is he was bold, and when everything went sideways and he quit, Jesus appeared to him and brought him back in, and he forgave himself somehow, you know?
Yeah.
That's another surprise tonight, that Jesus named him that. Like, that wasn't his name that he was born with.
Well, in John's Gospel, it says that Andrew introduced Jesus to Peter, and Jesus said something about you'll be called Peter, because it means rock, and he called him Cephas. His real name is Simon.
Simon Bar-Jonah.
Bar-Jonah just means son of John.
Simon, son of John.
Simon or Jonah. Jonah and John, same thing, different language. Yeah, so his real name was Shimon. You've heard of the former Prime Minister of Israel was Shimon Peres. He was Shimon, Simon, and Jesus called him Cephas, which we say Cephas, spelled with a C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did anyone on Facebook say anything?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. We probably will look at the sheep and the goats parable next week, because it has a mention of Hades in it.
That's right. That's another way we think of heaven and hell. All the sheep goes to heaven.
Yeah,
the goat represents hell.
Yes.
Yes. Let me ask you a question. If you heard someone tell a story about talking sheep, would you think it was factual or a parable?
A parable.
Just asking.
But, yeah, I hear yes, of course. But
talking sheep and goats do not exist. Just saying.
Now, are you sure? I've seen many a cartoon where they're talking.
Meh. Meh.
I remember Lamb Chop. You remember Lamb Chop?
Oh, of course, the puppet. What was her name? Shirley?
Lamb Chop talked.
What was her name, Shirley? Sheila, Shirley. Was it Shirley?
Shirley.
Shirley somebody. She had a puppet named Lamb Chop. You don't remember that TV show?
I was too young.
Yeah, sock puppet.
I was young.
You were too young, yeah. She's only 29, so.
There you go. Don't forget.
Y'all have a blessed evening. Love all of you. Thank you for coming. We'll have worship at 10 o'clock on Sunday, and we'll see you here next Wednesday night, same time, same channel. We'll be on Facebook. We'll be on Zoom at 6:30 p.m. Central.
Yeah.
See you then.
Thank y'all. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Good seeing y'all. Have a good evening.
Seeing you too.
All right. Sheila, please say hey to Sam for me.
I will.